to share.
We're in the middle of summer, aren't we? How do you like it?
Yes.
You like the hot weather?
Uh,
Some people love the hot weather, some people don't. It depends where you work too. Some places get really hot if you're in a factory job. Last week we talked about violence and how it is upscaling in this world. There's not a question, there's a need for compassion. And we're going to talk about that this morning, how Jesus discussed it in one of the Gospels. First, I'd like to share this story. At approximately 3:20 on the morning of March 13, 1964, 28-year-old young lady, her name was Kitty Genovese. She is returning to her home in a nice middle-class area of Queens, New York. She parked her car in a nearby parking lot, turned off the lights, and started to walk to her second-floor apartment some 35 yards away. Really not that far. She got as far as the streetlight when a man grabbed her. She screamed. Lights went on in the 10-floor apartment building nearby. She yelled, "Oh my God, he stabbed me! Please help me!" Windows opened in the apartment building, and a man's voice shouted, "Let that girl alone!" The attacker looked up, shrugged, and walked off down the street. Miss Genovese struggled to get to her feet. Lights went back off in the apartments. The attacker came back and stabbed her again. She again cried out, "I'm dying, I'm dying!" And again the lights came on and the windows opened in many of the nearby apartments. The assailant again left and got into his car and drove away. Miss Genovese staggered to her feet as a city bus drove by. It was now 3:35 a.m. The attacker returned once again. He found her in the doorway of the foot of the stairs, and he stabbed her a third time, this time with a fatal consequence. It was 3:50 when the police received the first call. They responded quickly, and within 2 minutes were at the scene. Miss Genovese was already dead. Can you imagine? Detectives that were investigating this murder discovered that no fewer than 38 of her neighbors had witnessed at least one of the killer's 3 attacks that had neither come to her nor called the police. The one call that was made to the police came after Miss Genovese was already dead. We live in a world where we don't want to get involved, where somebody else will help. We have our reasons. I give here, I give there, I do this, I do that. What happened in that situation? What happened?
Well, they use it in social psychology books as the classic example of responsibility diffusion. When there are other people around, well, somebody else will take care of it.
That could very well be. Somebody else can do it. Oh, somebody else surely will.
Or somebody else already did.
Like it is compassion. It's passion at its positive best. You see the hands there with the little bird. Compassion, by definition, and we're going to get into it, moves a person to action. That's what compassion does. It moves someone to do something, to reach beyond themselves. Compassion. Jesus said a mark of the end days in Matthew 24 is that the love of most will grow cold. That's a mark of the last days of this earth. That people's love will grow cold. Indifferent. Apathetic. I like that one. Compassion is a verb. It means, compassion means you do something. You just don't tear up. Compassion is something we do. God so loved the world that what? He stayed up in heaven and cried, or He prayed for us? No, God so loved the world that He gave. He did something. He created action. He gave. Compassion is a verb. Here is a passage. It's in Luke chapter 10. Let's read together. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Can you, just think about this. Here's Jesus. It was not a sincere question. He asked him this to test him. He's an expert in the law. What do you suppose that he was trying to do?
Trap him.
To see if he would say what the law said. What the Old Testament law would say. How does a person get eternal life? Let's keep going. Verse 26. What is written in the law? He replied. How do you read it? How do you like Jesus' answer? He answers his question with what? Two questions. Have you experienced this before in God? You ask God a question, and you're left with more questions. Read Job. Job had many questions for God, and then when God answered him, he says, "Where were you when the foundations of the earth were laid?" And he keeps going and going and going, and he answers Job's question with many, 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 many more questions, and within that, Job got his answers. But what Jesus is revealing this man's heart, and he's pulling it out of him. What great teachers do is not necessarily tell their students everything. They try to pull stuff out of the students. Sometimes they pull out what the student knows. How many know this? If a teacher says it, you may not get it, but if it comes out of your own mouth, you may understand it better. That's a good teacher. Let's keep going. Verse 27. He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." You answered correctly, Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked, "And who is my neighbor?" Okay, we're supposed to love our neighbor, but who is that neighbor? Well, what does love really mean? I mean, we can go on and on and on. We have in our own heads what we think it means. And this is the story that Jesus told. He did not say it was a parable. It could have been a true story. But it is parabolic in the sense that it is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And he goes on. Verse 30, let's read together. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Let's pause right there. It was known that there was a lot of trouble that happens on the road to Jericho. Oftentimes, people would get ambushed. They would get beaten. There was stealing along that road. So this possibly could be an actual real story. You notice, they went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Jerusalem is what? It's God's chosen, it's the chosen city where the Ark of the Covenant was. And the further you get from where God is, the worse it gets. You always go down from God, right? If you're with God, if you leave God, you're going down. So such was the case with this man. They beat him. They stole from him, leaving him half dead. Verse 31. A priest happened to be going down that same road. When he saw the man, he passed on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. Okay, let's just think. A priest. A priest is the one who ministers in the temple. The high priest is the one that goes before the Holy of Holies. And a Levite is who's a Levite?
Levites were the priests, weren't they?
Levites were the ones that
They were the tribe that made
they knew the law. They knew the law. The Levite knew the law, and many of the Levites were also priests, but the Levites specifically knew the letter of the law. And what did the letter of the law say? Anybody know? Concerning those that are dead.
You'll be
Okay.
unclean if you touch them.
If you touch them, you'll be unclean, and then what happens?
You're not allowed to associate with others.
You can't minister. You can't do your job. But let's just think about it. They're going away from Jerusalem. I think they already did their job and they're going somewhere else. But they saw him and went to the other side. Interesting. Verse 33. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. And the word pity there is not a great translation. Sometimes that's right from the NIV, but it's really not a great translation. The word is compassion there. And we're going to get into that actual Greek word. He had compassion on him. There's different times in the Bible where it says that Jesus had compassion on them. He had compassion on the young man that was demon-possessed. And he delivered him. He had compassion on the crowds. And that's one of the occasions where Jesus fed the thousands and thousands of people, because he had compassion on them. In the Bible, when you see compassion, right after you see the word compassion, you see action. There's action. Now, a Samaritan. Who was a Samaritan back in those days?
They were half-breeds.
They were
Lower than
They
God.
were
part Greek, part Jew. They were not accepted very well at all. They were people on the other side of the tracks. They were from the bad section of Cleveland. The bad section of Akron. They were not from the good section. Who knows who their father and their mother were? But this Samaritan came by. It says he had compassion on him. Verse 34. He went to him and bandaged his wounds. pouring on oil and wine. And then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Okay, 2 denarii means 2 months' wages. I don't know about you, when you travel, how do you travel? Do you travel with, now back then they didn't have credit cards. Here were the priest, here was the Levite, here was the Samaritan. They were all going down the same road, they all came by the same person. When you travel, do you take a lot of extra money with you? Do you take a lot of extra resources with you? How do you travel? How do you do that? Normally, if I'm traveling somewhere, I take what I need until I get back home. I don't take everything with me. But here's this man, he's given 2 months of his wages, he poured out the oil and wine, I don't know where he got the bandages from, maybe, I don't know how prepared, where did he get these things? I don't know, I have no idea. This took some time and some effort. And how many of us know this? Everyone here normally has a schedule. We're going somewhere. When we're out and about, we're going somewhere. Isn't that right? Here's a thought. Life happens when we outside of our normal way of doing things. Life happens in the cracks of life. That's when real life happens. He didn't plan on doing this. He had to delay where he was going. Isn't that right? How many of us know that it's hard sometimes to delay what we want to do? We have a schedule. Real life happens, not necessarily in our schedule. Real life happens in the cracks. That's when we find out who we are sometimes. Are we willing to sacrifice ourselves and our schedule and our time and what we wanted to do with our money? So here it is. He said, I'm going to give you 2 months' wages, look after him. When I return, I'll reimburse you for the extra expense. Verse 36. Which of these 3 do you think were a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. He didn't say, well, that'd be a good idea to do that, wouldn't it? Isn't that a nice thought? Think about this. That's a nice little sermon thought. Have a great day. Go! That's a command, isn't it? This is what we are to do. This is how we are to live. There is the Greek word.
Sounds like a stomachache.
Sounds like a pastry or something.
Oh my goodness.
You go, Migs.
To be moved as to one's bowels, hence to be moved with compassion.
It is a stomachache.
Have compassion. For the bowels were thought to be the seat of love back in that day. The bowels of a person. How many know when you're moved from your gut, from the deepest place of you, that when we're moved, we're disturbed down deep that moves us to a place. That's what this is talking about. We're so moved that we can't go on and do what we normally did anymore. Life stops. When compassion rises in us, when compassion is a part of our life, when God's love is there, we stop our normal routine. Compassion is the response to the suffering of others that motivates a desire to help. The word, the first part of that word, kampe, means suffer. We hurt with the people so much that we have to help. That's what goes on with someone that has compassion. It's like we don't have a choice. We must move. In our story, let's think about the story. Here are the different players. There's the robber, there's the priest, there's the Levite, There's the Samaritan. That was the innkeeper. Didn't put him down. Who does the robber represent in the story? Yeah, this is open for interpretation.
Terrorist.
Like the devil. Excellent.
Could be. Yeah. And where does the devil live?
In the bad and the good.
Where does he live?
He's the god of the air.
He lives in the earth, doesn't he? He was thrown down to the earth. And he's roaming about the earth, and he goes up and he talks to God in Job, right? He says, I've been roaming down the earth, and I observed your servant Job. That's what the devil does. He roams down the earth. Sometimes, but it's like it's when it's in the middle of winter, when it's really cold out. Because we don't necessarily have our heat just blaring during the night when we sleep, you know. We turn it down a bit. And when I get out of bed, sometimes I say, but it's a cold world out here. I believe the robber represents the world. This is, how many know that you can try to, the world is not going to give us the help we need, is it? Money doesn't give us the help we need, does it? All sorts of things won't give us the help we need. It takes that out of us. If we partner with the world, we're going to end up beaten up, stripped, and half dead if we commit ourselves to go the way of the world. And what does the priest? The priest can represent what?
The church.
The church. There you go. How many know the church don't save you? Sometimes the church can be a cold place. The church can walk on the other side where you're all broken. The world can't save you. The church can't save you. How about what's the Levite?
The law.
The law. The government. The government won't save you. How many know that? Sometimes we look to the world and the worldly ways to help us. Sometimes we look to the church to help us. Sometimes we look to the government to bail us out. And who does the Samaritan represent?
The despised, the merciful, maybe the follower of Christ.
Yeah, I think the Samaritan represents Jesus. He's the one, he saw humanity and he stopped and he left heaven. He came down to earth. He came to us. He poured out. What did he pour out in this story? He poured out what? Oil and wine. Wine is symbolic of his blood. He poured his blood out. And because of Jesus, the Holy Spirit has been poured out. And he takes care of us. Right where we're wounded. And he walks with us. There are three different thoughts that I see in this passage. Attitudes of life. The robber's attitude was, what's yours is mine. What's yours is mine. Have you ever had that attitude? What's yours is mine. Think back. If you haven't, either you're lying to yourself or you've never lived. What's yours is mine. What now? I think we go there sometimes, don't we?
Yeah.
That's the heart of a user or a taker. We're always looking for the deal. We're always looking to take more than we give. We always want a little bit more on the other end than what we're putting out. That's the heart of a user. It's also a heart of entitlement. I deserve this. I owe this. They owe this to me.
And sometimes people do that. That's why they're able to steal, because it's entitled to me. They feel that it's owed them. And so they can even, well, it's a pencil at work and, I can take it home and who cares? I worked for it. As little as a pencil to as much as all sorts of things. They owe this to me. We shave off our time a little bit here and there. But yet we get paid for it. We don't really give a honest, good effort at work. We sort of coast. That's a heart of entitlement. A heart of selfish desperation. I believe if you're at the point of what's yours is mine, you're a desperate person. You're a selfishly desperate person. And you've somehow, in our heads, we've somehow justified that it's okay to be selfish and take from somebody. People do that. How many know that drug dealers, and how many know that people that are addicted to drugs are desperately selfish? You'll do what you can to take, to get something that's not yours. It's a cold heart. What's yours is mine. That's one of the pervading thoughts in this story. What's yours is mine. That's an attitude of life. And it's a heart of frustration. How many know what the definition of frustration is? Pam told it to me. Pam Wilkinson one day told it to me, and I looked it up. Someone that's, the word at the heart of frustration means you're defeated.
Yeah, that's the opposite.
Defeated. Someone that's defeated. That's all someone can do at that point, is take, because they have nothing. There's no way out. And this is my only way out. Is by trying to get something that's not mine. What's yours is mine. That's one of the pervading thoughts. That's the robber. What's yours is mine. Demarius Thomas, he's a football player. When he was 11 years old, Thomas's mother was arrested and sent to prison. At that time, my father was in the military, Thomas says. My mother and stepfather and grandmother were locked up. I mean, think about this kid. From that day on, I was basically an orphan. I came home from school that day and I thought, where do I go now? He eventually made it through high school and college and became a standout wide receiver. But listen to how Thomas describes what helped him. People think that orphans are kids whose parents have died, but 80% of orphans in the world have at least one parent who is alive somewhere. There are millions of kids just like me across the U.S. and hundreds of millions all over the world. We rely on the kindness on the couches of others to get us through the day. I had multiple high school coaches who looked out for me, multiple college coaches, deacons, pastors, aunties, uncles, friends. If even one of those people had let me slip, would you even know my name? Probably not. I talk to a lot of kids who have parents in prison or who have left them when they were young for one reason or another. I know the anger, the pain, the fear, especially the loneliness. They just want somebody to say, I care about you. But that doesn't happen enough, so they get into trouble. As men, as athletes especially, we don't like to talk about love. We talk about brotherhood and all that, but not love. But it's the most important thing in a child's life. More important than the kind of school you go to, or a neighborhood you live in, or even if you grow up around drugs or violence. If you are loved, you'll make it. People reached out to him and had compassion. That's why Demarius Thomas made it. What yours is mine. What's mine is mine. To me, that is what happened with the priest and the Levite, what's mine is mine, and they went on. How many of you ever had that attitude? What's mine's mine, but it's none of my business. It's not, I'm not going to get involved. It's none of my business. It's none of my business. This is an attitude of self-absorption. We're just into ourselves. It's an attitude that it's about me, myself, and I. I'm just trying to get by today. How are you today? Okay. Just getting by. I'm all right. An attitude of self-absorption. I gave at church. I'm fine. I give to Haven at Rest. I don't need to talk to this person. It's an attitude of justification. We have justified ourselves in why we are not involved with people. Well, if I do this, then this happens and that happens. What are they going to do? Jesus got way involved. What happened to him? They killed him. You haven't been killed yet, have you? Hallelujah. That means you still got a mission on the earth, right? Hallelujah. All right. But we have an attitude of justification. We justify when we don't help others. We justify when we have little compassion. How about this? A heart of indifference. Isn't that what it goes down to? We're just, we're not moved. It doesn't move us. We're desensitized. Well, I like this story. Paco Mater, pastor in a little village of Chicago's west side. He lives in a neighborhood rife with gang violence. He tells the following story about being invited to lead a prayer vigil for a young man who had been gunned down by a rival gang. He says, when I arrived at the vigil, a large crowd of young people, including many known gang members, had already gathered around the sidewalk where I would be praying. I wondered, what should I do? What should I say? I felt fearful and inadequate, yet I also knew that they had gathered for this prayer vigil. So amid my tears, I prayed silently.